Hey guys, tonight we're diving into how to survive Victorian London. Forget everything Hollywood told you, this is the real story. And trust me, you probably wouldn't last a day. So before you get too comfortable, hit that like button if you enjoyed this kind of deep dive, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and more importantly, if you think you'd survive this smog-choked fever dream of a city. Now, dim the lights, maybe grab a snack, but definitely avoid the meat pies. Let's jump in. You wake up on a damp, flea-ridden straw mattress. It smells like mildew, cheap gin, and regret. There's a thin beam of sunlight cutting through a cracked, soot-stained window, and the sound of hooves on cobblestones outside. Congratulations, you're in Victorian London. And you're already in trouble. Your boots are missing. So is your last coin. Also your tooth. Yup, you're one incisor short. Welcome to 1852, where crime doesn't sleep, it pickpockets you, and dentistry is done with pliers and a prayer. Let me ask you, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in your own time? Check your phone? Scroll Instagram? In Victorian London, the only thing you re-scrolling is your name onto the coroner's ledger if you're not careful. So, what's the plan? Get clean, good luck. The shared bath down the hall has water that looks like it's been brewed from chimney sweep sweat. And soap, luxury. You might find some if you're rich. Or rob a duchess. Hungry, you head to the street, where the breakfast options include boiled eel, yes, eel for breakfast, a questionable meat pie that may or may not contain cat, or a chunk of hard bread with a side of despair. Comment below. What are you choosing for your Victorian breakfast of champions? Now that you've survived your wake-up call barely, let's talk about getting around. You step into the street, and bam, you're nearly flattened by a horse-drawn carriage. London traffic in the 1800s. Chaos. Think New York at rush hour, but with manure. Everywhere. You dodge a cart, nearly twist an ankle on a loose cobblestone, and a chimney sweep, probably 12 years old and with more soot than soul, shouts something rude at you in thick Cockney slang. You have no idea what he said, but you're 80% sure it was an insult and 20% sure he cursed your descendants. Oh, and that fog, not romantic, not mysterious. It's basically a gas chamber made of coal smoke and disease. London's famous pea soup fog could literally kill you, and often did. You pull your coat tighter, assuming you have one, and keep moving. You've got to find work, or food, or someone who can explain why people are shouting Muffin Man every 10 minutes. Quick pause, would you have made it this far? Be honest. Drop a emoji in the comments if you already have given up and curled into a fetal position next to a sewer grate. No shame. Also, if you're liking this grimy tour through history, give it a share, help a friend realize how soft they'd be in the 1800s. You need money, you consider your options. Work in a factory. Hope you enjoy 14-hour shifts, lung damage, and occasional finger loss. Sell flowers on the street. Adorable, until winter hits and your fingers go numb. Maybe become a mudlark, scavenging the banks of the Thames for lost trinkets and bones. Yes, bones. People sold bones. Remember when you complained about slow Wi-Fi? Yeah, now you're up to your knees in river sludge, trying to find a spoon. So far, you've dodged disease, carriages, starvation, and child pickpockets. You're officially barely alive. But hold on, things are about to get even more interesting. Next up, we're going to the workhouse. That's right, Victorian London's answer to welfare, and also the closest thing to hell you can experience without dying. Think you're ready? Think again. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of our journey. Or else we'll send a plague doctor to your house. Kidding. Mostly. We walk through our modern lives grumbling about latte orders and low battery alerts. But 150 years ago, people were worried about cholera and being trampled by livestock. Perspective. So what do you think? Would you survive a day in Victorian London? A week? Let me know in the comments, and tell me where we should time travel next. Hey guys, tonight we're diving into how to survive Victorian London. Forget everything Hollywood told you, this is the real story. And trust me, you probably wouldn't last a day. So before you get too comfortable, hit that like button if you enjoyed this kind of deep dive, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and more importantly, if you think you'd survive this smog-choked fever dream of a city. Now, dim the lights, maybe grab a snack, but definitely avoid the meat pies. Let's jump in. You wake up on a damp, flea-ridden straw mattress. It smells like mildew, cheap gin, and regret. There's a thin beam of sunlight cutting through a cracked, soot-stained window, and the sound of hooves on cobblestones outside. Congratulations, you're in Victorian London. ... And you're already in trouble. Your boots are missing. So is your last coin. Also ... your tooth. Yup. You're one incisor short. Welcome to 1852, where crime doesn't sleep, it pickpockets you, and dentistry is done with pliers and a prayer. Let me ask you, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in your own time? Check your phone? Scroll Instagram? In Victorian London, the only thing you re-scrolling is your name onto the coroner's ledger if you not careful. So, what's the plan? Get clean, good luck. The shared bath down the hall has water that looks like it's been brewed from chimney sweep sweat. And soap, luxury. You might find some if you're rich. Or rob a duchess. Hungry, you head to the street, where the breakfast options include boiled eel, yes, eel for breakfast, a questionable meat pie that may or may not contain cat, or a chunk of hard bread with a side of despair. Comment below, what are you choosing for your Victorian breakfast of champions? Now that you've survived your wake-up call barely, let's talk about getting around. You step into the street, and bam, you're nearly flattened by a horse-drawn carriage. London traffic in the 1800s. Chaos. Think New York at rush hour, but with manure. Everywhere. You dodge a cart, nearly twist an ankle on a loose cobblestone, and a chimney sweep, probably 12 years old and with more soot than soul, shouts something rude at you in thick Cockney slang. You have no idea what he said, but you're 80% sure it was an insult and 20% sure he cursed your descendants. Oh, and that fog, not romantic, not mysterious. It's basically a gas chamber made of coal smoke and disease. London's famous pea soup fog could literally kill you, and often did. You pull your coat tighter, assuming you have one, and keep moving. You've got to find work, or food, or someone who can explain why people are shouting Muffin Man every 10 minutes. Quick pause, would you have made it this far? Be honest. Drop a emoji in the comments if you already have given up and curled into a fetal position next to a sewer grate. No shame. Also, if you're liking this grimy tour through history, give it a share, help a friend realize how soft they'd be in the 1800s. You need money, you consider your options. Work in a factory. Hope you enjoy 14-hour shifts, lung damage, and occasional finger loss. Sell flowers on the street. Adorable, until winter hits and your fingers go numb. Maybe become a mudlark, scavenging the banks of the Thames for lost trinkets and bones. Yes, bones. People sold bones. Remember when you complained about slow Wi-Fi? Yeah, now you're up to your knees in river sludge, trying to find a spoon. So far, you've dodged disease, carriages, starvation, and child pickpockets. You're officially ... barely alive. But hold on, things are about to get even more interesting. Next up, we're going to the workhouse. That's right, Victorian London's answer to welfare, and also the closest thing to hell you can experience without dying. Think you're ready? Think again. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of our journey. Or else we'll send a plague doctor to your house. Kidding. Mostly. We walk through our modern lives grumbling about latte orders and low battery alerts. But 150 years ago, people were worried about cholera and being trampled by livestock. Perspective. So what do you think? Would you survive a day in Victorian London? A week? Let me know in the comments, and tell me where we should time travel next. Because today is a public hanging, and this is the 1800s equivalent of binge-watching a true crime docuseries, except it's live, louder, and way more ethically questionable. Vendors are selling gingerbread effigies of the condemned. I wish I was making that up. People are cheering. Someone's had 3 ills and is singing a folk song about infidelity and venereal disease. The prisoner walks out. The crowd leans forward. The trapdoor opens. Snap. Everyone claps. Some people cry. Others buy more snacks. Victorian fun for the whole family. Imagine this happening today. You're scrolling TikTok and suddenly, live. Local teen hanged for borrowing a horse without asking. Smash that like button if justice is brutal. Victorians didn't just tolerate public executions, they turned them into social events, dates, field trips, family bonding time. I saw my first hanging at 6, just like Dad did. Ah, memories. Let's say you don't get the rope. you get prison, specifically Pentonville or Millbank, brick fortresses that made the word dreary feel underdressed. No talking, no eye contact. You walk in silence, work in silence, sleep in silence. Your food, gruel and more gruel. Your toilet, a bucket. Your bed, a board. They called it the separate system because nothing says rehabilitation like psychological isolation and constant surveillance. Oh, and some prisons made you turn a crank for hours a day, just a wheel. No purpose, just cranking. Pure Victorian logic. Let's break their spirit just enough so they behave, but not enough that they stop cranking. Be honest, you commit a crime in Victorian London. Do you, A. Try to run but trip over your 12-pound boots? B. Confess immediately and cry in public? C. Accept your fate and start selling execution souvenirs? Comment your criminal alter ego below. Extra points for creativity. Here's the thing, it worked. Sort of. Crime did drop, but so did hope. For the poor, the sick, the young, the line between survival and criminality was razor thin. Steal to eat, that's a gallows offense. Beg too loudly, you're a nuisance. Die in public. Tried to do it quietly, please, and still, people lived. They adapted, they helped each other. They found ways to laugh, sometimes even in the shadow of the scaffold. Because even when the system broke them, they refused to break entirely. Next up, Victorian romance, from stolen glances on grimy streets to love letters soaked in coal dust. We'll explore how people found connection, flirtation, and occasionally syphilis in the most unlikely places. So hit like, share this misery with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss what might be the least sexy love story ever told. So, you've survived the workhouse. You lived through a Victorian doctor visit with all your limbs mostly intact. But you haven't truly experienced Victorian London until you've smelled it from below. Welcome to the sewers. No, not metaphorically. We're going in. Grab your torch, it's just a candle tied to a stick. Hold your breath and pray you don't slip. Because if you think London above ground was bad, you ain't sniffed anything yet. The year is 1858. It's summer. It's hot. And the Thames, London's main river, drinking source, and unofficial toilet, has officially turned into a weapon of mass olfactory destruction. The smell, so bad that Parliament literally had to shut down because MPs were gagging during debates. The government tried soaking the curtains in vinegar. Didn't help. People were fainting in the streets. Fish were floating belly up. Babies were crying just by existing. They called it the Great Stink, and honestly, that's underselling it. Now imagine, you're a sewer man, because jobs were scarce. You and your candle on a stick crouch into a damp brick tunnel. Everything is slick, it echoes. You hear something splash. It wasn't water. You're knee-deep in night soil. That's what they charmingly called human waste. Literal poop, flowing freely under the city, sometimes not even under, just through side alleys. The walls sweat, the air tastes chunky, and there's something squirming on the stone next to you. Leech, rat, half-digested eel, at this point, who cares? Comment below, would you keep going for a paycheck? Or quit and sell questionable pies instead? Now let's say you're even lower on the survival chain. You're a tosher. That means your entire job is to rummage through the sewers for coins, scraps of metal, bones, anything worth selling. People did this daily, voluntarily, in the dark, with no gloves, and no antibiotics. Toshers were like the loot goblins of the Victorian underworld. Except instead of gold, they found rusty nails and teeth. Some even trained rats to sniff out shiny things. Others just learned to ignore the boils. Fun times, out the window. Hence the warning cry, Gardez-vous, it's Frenchish for lookout. And means I'm about to dump human waste from the second floor. So yeah. Victorian sidewalks, not great for open-toed shoes. Real talk. You step outside your house tomorrow and someone dumps a bucket of warm mystery sludge on your head. What do you do? Scream and move to another century B. Start yelling Gardez-vous. To warn your neighbors, see pretend it's raining and keep walking like a true Londoner. Comment your survival strategy. And if you've made it this far in our journey, go ahead and hit like. You've earned it. Probably need a shower, too. Let's come back above ground. Specifically, to St. Giles, Seven Dials, or Whitechapel, infamous London slums where buildings leaned like they were drunk, and entire families lived in rooms the size of your average walk-in closet. The walls, moldy. The roof, optional. The neighbors, loud. Also possibly dead. You walk through alleys so narrow to rats can't pass each other without awkwardly apologizing. Children run barefoot through broken glass, and somewhere, a woman is selling matches while coughing up what sounds suspiciously like her lungs. Your choices for housing: a doss house bed pay per night, sleep next to 12 strangers. No refunds, a rope bed, yes, the literal rope you lean over to sleep upright, until they cut the rope at dawn or just. The street, rain, too bad. Cold, here's a potato. Honestly, you're starting to wonder if time travel was a mistake. So to recap, you've crawled through filth, lived among disease, smelled things no nose should ever smell, slept on rope, and yet, the city thrived. It grew, it evolved. Not despite the filth, but because of the sheer grit of the people who refused to die in it. Victorian London was cruel, dirty, and breathtakingly unfair, but it was also alive. Next episode, we'll peel back another dark layer: crime and punishment. From child pickpockets to public hangings and the terrifying sound of boots in a narrow alley. Spoiler: justice wasn't always just. Ah, so you sneezed. Once, loudly. In Victorian London. That's not just a mild inconvenience, it's a medical emergency. Not for you, but for everyone around you who now thinks you've got consumption. You try to wave it off. Allergies, you say. But no one knows what that is, and now someone's calling the local surgeon, which, in this era, is basically a barber with a sharp knife and no chill. You're about to enter the dark, blood-stained realm of Victorian medicine. Hold your breath, literally. It's safer. Let's say you're not immediately quarantined or thrown into a fever ward. Lucky you. Instead, you're shuffled into an apothecary's shop. Shelves creak under bottles labeled things like laudanum, aka liquid opium, for kids too. Mercury pills. Fun fact: mercury is toxic, and something called Dr. Blythe's nerve tonic, which probably contains more gin than actual medicine. The smell: a mix of camphor, vinegar, rotting herbs, and Victorian hope, aka desperation. The apothecary takes one look at you and declares you have humor's out of balance, which means absolutely nothing. But it sounds official, right? So what's the treatment? Let's break it down. 1. Bloodletting. Yup, still a thing. You're handed a bowl and politely told to bleed a little. Too much sadness. Cut a vein. Headache. Open a vein. Existential dread. Have you tried? More leeches too. Leeches. Those slimy little vampires were basically the interns of Victorian medicine. They're slapped on your chest, neck, even your eyelids. No, really. And you just have to sit there while they squirm. 3. Trepanning. Feeling anxious. Doctors might just drill a hole in your skull to release the bad air. Because clearly, oxygen management via cranial trauma was science back then. 4. Smoking pipes for children. Cough too much, give your kid a pipe. Tobacco soothes the lungs, they said. It doesn't. It absolutely does not. 5. Amputation. Any limb injury. Chop it off. Splinters. Cut it. Broken toe. Gone. That knee acting weird. Who needs knees? Surgeries were done without anesthesia until the late 1800s. Just a few gulps of gin, a leather strap to bite down on, and 2 guys to hold you still. And surgery wasn't measured in hours. It was measured in seconds. Why? Because if the patient didn't die of shock, the doctor might faint from exhaustion. Fastest recorded leg amputation, 28 seconds. He accidentally cut off 2 fingers from his assistant and slashed bystander's coat. All 3 died. Let's pause right here. Would you trust a doctor who thinks headaches come from demons and prescribes morphine for hiccups? Drop A in the comments if you'd rather take your chances with the rats again. Or A if you'd still try Victorian dentistry. Coming up next. And yes, it's even worse. So, you've tried the potions. You've been bled. You're still sneezing. Now, you've been kindly escorted to the fever ward. Think a hospital, but worse. 10 people crammed in one room, moaning like ghosts, sweating buckets, and probably dying of something you can't pronounce. The only curtain between you and the next patient. A thin rag that hasn't been washed since Napoleon was relevant. The nurse hands you a cup of something murky and says, "Drink." It calms the bile. You ask what's in it. She winks and walks away. Your bed is lumpy. Your neighbor is hallucinating and talking to a boot. And the doctor? He just muttered cholera under his breath and left with a shrug. Honestly, you're starting to miss the workhouse. Congratulations. You've survived a Victorian doctor visit. You've been poked, bled, half poisoned, possibly haunted, but you're alive. For now, but let's be honest, if your body doesn't kill you, the treatment might. Moral of the story, if you ever time travel and start feeling sick, just don't. Lie, hide, drink water and pray. But do not let anyone near you with a jar of leeches and a bone saw. Next time, we're going beneath the surface, into London's sewers, plague pits, and the very real danger of falling into an open cesspool on your morning walk. So if you're not too traumatized already, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and prepare to get filthy in the next episode of How to Survive Victorian London. Until then, avoid suspicious tonics, appreciate modern band-aids, and for heaven's sake, don't let anyone drill a hole in your skull. Think you've got it bad? Imagine being 8 years old and getting arrested for stealing a handkerchief. That actually happened, often. And what's worse, kids weren't treated much differently than adults. They went to prison, with adults, or to reform schools, which were basically prisons with extra prayers and slightly fewer rats. Some kids were even executed. Yes, executed. As in publicly hanged while Victorians watched and cheered like it was a football match. Victorian childhood. Not exactly all jump ropes and sunshine. It's early morning. You've joined a crowd of thousands gathered outside Newgate Prison. Why? Because today is a public hanging, and this is the 1800s equivalent of binge-watching a true crime docuseries, except it's live, louder, and way more ethically questionable. Vendors are selling gingerbread effigies of the condemned. I wish I was making that up. People are cheering. Someone's had 3 ills and is singing a folk song about infidelity and venereal disease. The prisoner walks out. The crowd leans forward. The trapdoor opens. Snap. Everyone claps. Some people cry. Others buy more snacks. Victorian fun for the whole family. Imagine this happening today. You're scrolling TikTok and suddenly, live. Local teen hanged for borrowing a horse without asking. Smash that like button if justice is brutal. Victorians didn't just tolerate public executions, they turned them into social events, dates, field trips, family bonding time. I saw my first hanging at 6, just like Dad did. Ah, memories. Let's say you don't get the rope. You get prison, specifically Pentonville or Millbank, brick fortresses that made the word dreary feel underdressed. No talking, no eye contact. You walk in silence, work in silence, sleep in silence. Your food, gruel and more gruel. Your toilet, a bucket. Your bed, a board. They called it the separate system, because nothing says rehabilitation like psychological isolation and constant surveillance. Oh, and some prisons made you turn a crank for hours a day, just a wheel. No purpose, just cranking. Pure Victorian logic. Let's break their spirit just enough so they behave, but not enough that they stop cranking. Be honest, you commit a crime in Victorian London. Do you? Try to run but trip over your 12-pound boots. B. Confess immediately and cry in public. C. Accept your fate and start selling execution souvenirs. Comment your criminal alter ego below. Extra points for creativity. Here's the thing, it worked. Sort of. Crime did drop, but so did hope. For the poor, the sick, the young, the line between survival and criminality was razor thin. Steal to eat, that's a gallows offense. Beg too loudly, you're a nuisance. Die in public. Tried to do it quietly, please, and still, people lived. They adapted. They helped each other. They found ways to laugh, sometimes even in the shadow of the scaffold. Because even when the system broke them, they refused to break entirely. Next up, Victorian romance. From stolen glances on grimy streets to love letters soaked in coal dust. We'll explore how people found connection, flirtation, and occasionally syphilis in the most unlikely places. So hit like, share this misery with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss what might be the least sexy love story ever told. Until then, keep your pockets closed, your guilt quiet, and remember, justice in Victorian London was blind, but also kinda drunk. So, you've survived the workhouse. You lived through a Victorian doctor visit with all your limbs mostly intact. But you haven't truly experienced Victorian London until you've smelled it from below. Welcome to the sewers. No, not metaphorically, We're going in. Grab your torch, it's just a candle tied to a stick. Hold your breath and pray you don't slip. Because if you think London above ground was bad, you ain't sniffed anything yet. The year is 1858. It's summer. It's hot. And the Thames, London's main river, drinking source, and unofficial toilet, has officially turned into a weapon of mass olfactory destruction. The smell, so bad that Parliament literally had to shut down because MPs were gagging during debates. The government tried soaking the curtains in vinegar. Didn't help. People were fainting in the streets. Fish were floating belly up. Babies were crying just by existing. They called it the Great Stink. And honestly, that's underselling it, because jobs were scarce. You and your candle on a stick crouch into a damp brick tunnel. Everything is slick. It echoes. You hear something splash. It wasn't water. You're knee-deep in night soil. That's what they charmingly called human waste. Literal poop, flowing freely under the city, sometimes not even under, just through side alleys. The walls sweat. The air tastes ... chunky. And there's something squirming on the stone next to you. Leech, rat, half-digested eel. At this point, who cares? Comment below, would you keep going for a paycheck? Or quit and sell questionable pies instead? Now let's say you're even lower on the survival chain. You're a tosher. That means your entire job is to rummage through the sewers for coins, scraps of metal, bones, anything worth selling. People did this daily, voluntarily, in the dark, with no gloves, and no antibiotics. Toshers were like the loot goblins of the Victorian underworld. Except instead of gold, they found rusty nails and teeth. Some even trained rats to sniff out shiny things. Others just learned to ignore the boils. Fun times, out the window. Hence the warning cry, Gardez-vous, it's Frenchish for lookout. And means I'm about to dump human waste from the second floor. So yeah. Victorian sidewalks, not great for open-toed shoes. Real talk. You step outside your house tomorrow and someone dumps a bucket of warm mystery sludge on your head. What do? Scream and move to another century B, start yelling Gardez-vous. To warn your neighbors, see, pretend it's raining and keep walking like a true Londoner. Comment your survival strategy. And if you've made it this far in our journey, go ahead and hit like. You've earned it. Probably need a shower, too. Let's come back above ground. Specifically, to St. Giles, Seven Dials, or Whitechapel, infamous London slums where buildings leaned like they were drunk, and entire families lived in rooms the size of your average walk-in closet. The walls, moldy. The roof, optional. The neighbors, loud. Also possibly dead. You walk through alleys so narrow to rats can't pass each other without awkwardly apologizing. Children run barefoot through broken glass. And somewhere, a woman is selling matches while coughing up what sounds suspiciously like her lungs. Your choices for housing: a doss house bed, pay per night, sleep next to 12 strangers. No refunds, a rope bed, yes, the literal rope you lean over to sleep upright, until they cut the rope at dawn, or just the street. Rain, too bad. Cold, here's a potato. Honestly, you're starting to wonder if time travel was a mistake. So to recap, you've crawled through filth, lived among disease, smelled things no nose should ever smell, slept on rope, and yet, the city thrived. It grew. It evolved. Not despite the filth, but because of the sheer grit of the people who refused to die in it. Victorian London was cruel, dirty, and breathtakingly unfair, but it was also live. Let's be clear. In Victorian London, childhood was not a protected phase of life. It was unpaid labor with extra rickets. If you were poor, and statistically, your childhood ended the moment you could hold a broom or lie about your age to a factory owner. There were no iPads, no playgrounds, no therapy. Only soot, soup, and siblings with names like Nipper and Small Dave. Let's dive in. You're born. Congrats, you made it through childbirth, which, for your mother, was like playing Russian roulette with a rusty spoon. You're wrapped in a threadbare cloth, baptized in icy water, and immediately exposed to an environment where 1 in 3 babies doesn't survive past the age of 5. And what's that in the air? Oh, it's the smell of coal smoke, rotting cabbage, and despair. Your first word? Probably cough. If you're lucky enough to play instead of work, congratulations, you're middle class. Your toys might include a hoop and stick, yes, literally just that, a doll stuffed with sawdust, a jack-in-the-box designed to cause nightmares, or if you're poor, a rock, a dead rat, or your own imagination and games. Oh, they're delightfully unsafe. Whip the top involves sharp spinning things. Snapdragon pull raisins from a bowl of burning alcohol. Kick the can because that's literally all you own. No helmets. No parental supervision, only vibes. What's the most dangerous game you played as a kid? Comment if yours involved fire, if it definitely should have resulted in a concussion, or if your childhood was spent inside with Cartoon Network and you re not ashamed. Ah yes, education. If your family could spare you from the match factory, you might attend a ragged school, charitable institutions for poor kids. Your classroom smells like damp wool and unbrushed teeth. You're crammed onto a wooden bench with 40 other soot gremlins, copying the alphabet onto a slate with a broken stub of chalk. The teacher, severe, possibly drunk, definitely armed with a cane. Subjects include reading, writing, arithmetic, and occasionally, religion plus shame equals moral development. You learn fast, or you get hit faster. By the 1870s, education became compulsory for kids up to age 10. Sounds good, right? Except no one enforced it, and many families just sent their kids to school long enough to avoid getting arrested, then yanked them back out when rent was due. Because what's more educational than child labor? At age 6 or 7, you might start working. Here's your resume. Chimney sweep, again, still terrifying. Factory helper, your job. Crawl under machines while they're running. Match girl, dip sticks in white phosphorus. Develop Fossey jaw hint. Your job on Rot Street. Hawker, sell flowers, matches, or newspapers until your voice gives out. Mudlark, search the Thames for anything sellable. Coins, bones occasionally. Corpses, you work long hours. You get paid pennies. Sometimes your only lunch is what you can find. Still want to romanticize the past? Let's go home. You live in a single room with 6 to 10 family members. There's no indoor plumbing, maybe a shared chamber pot. The walls are damp, the floor is straw. You sleep on a sack. There's mold, there are fleas. There's one blanket and someone's always coughing. If you're an orphan, even worse. You end up in a workhouse, which is basically a prison with less sunlight and more hymns. Food is minimal, beds are hard. Discipline is biblical. Childhood, it's a phase you survive, not enjoy. Be honest, what age would you have died in Victorian London? Comment your guess below. I lines go first. 9. I would have smart-mouthed the teacher and been struck by flying slate. But, and here's the twist, kids still found joy. They made games from nothing. They told stories. They sang songs. They climbed trees, even when the trees were mostly soot. Some went to Sunday school and learned to read. Some escaped poverty. A few even grew up to be writers, doctors, or, if you were Charles Dickens, wildly successful trauma novelists. Children in Victorian London were resilient, scrappy, and occasionally very good at stealing apples. Next up, we're heading to the Victorian underground. Secret societies, crypts, cabbies, opium dens, and the truth about gaslight. There is no coming back from a faceplant into that sack. Quick reality check. You've got to job offers. I climb chimneys filled with fire soot. Carry around bags of dog poop for cash. You want something night shift. Less smelly, perfect. You're now a resurrectionist. Also known as body snatcher. Yes, this was a real job. You dig up freshly buried corpses and sell them to medical schools for anatomy practice. Wait, you ask, wasn't that illegal? Very, but highly profitable. Surgeons needed bodies to study, and the law made it nearly impossible to get them legally. So grave robbing became a business. You'd sneak into cemeteries at night, lift a body, strip the clothes to avoid being charged with theft, and deliver it before dawn. Surgeons would pay handsomely. Sometimes in gin, sometimes in guineas, and if you got caught, you might end up in the very grave someone else digs up next week. Circle of life, baby. Now maybe you're not into filth or corpses. Respectable. You become a crossing sweeper. Your job, stand at street crossings with a broom and sweep away the horse manure, mud, and general slime so fancy people can cross without dirtying their dainty boots. It's like being a human windshield wiper, 4 feet, in a rainstorm of poo. They might toss you a coin, or just ignore you. Or trample you with a carriage, still better than grave robbing. Debatable. Last one. Brace yourself. You're a leech collector. Here's how it works. Wade into a pond or swamp, stand still until leeches attach to your legs, pull them off, sell them to doctors for bloodletting. That's it. That's the job. You are a human bait stick. A walking, bleeding vending machine. Some people lost so much blood doing this daily that they fainted and drowned. Others developed permanent infections in their legs. The Victorian resume writes itself. Skills. Tolerates pain, doesn't scream, excellent at removing living parasites. Live in a chimney for coins. Carry dog poop for prestige, or harvest leeches from your own legs every morning. Drop your answer in the comments and tag a friend who'd make a terrible resurrectionist. Here's the wildest part. People did these jobs because they had to. Because survival mattered more than dignity. Because feeding your family beat staying clean. Because no one else was going to save you. These jobs were dangerous, humiliating, and often fatal. But they also held the city together, in the gutters, in the shadows, under everyone's noses. And the people who did them, they were the uncredited, underpaid backbone of Victorian life. Next time, Victorian children. Yes, we're finally zooming in on the smallest survivors of London's darkest days. From chimney sweeps to factory boys to flower girls and pickpockets, it asks bring your child to work day, and the work might kill them. So, you've survived the workhouse, the sewer, the doctor, and a very casual legal system that nearly executed you for stealing a potato. Congrats. You've earned yourself something truly dangerous. A crush. But this is Victorian London. Love doesn't begin with a text or a swipe. It starts when someone across the street briefly makes eye contact with you for 1.2 seconds, and then immediately looks away. You're now engaged. Well, emotionally. Possibly spiritually. Legally, give it 5 years and a goat dowry. Victorian flirting was less Netflix and chill and more exchange glances at church, pass a folded note during a chaperone garden stroll, panic when your gloves brush accidentally, touching hands. Scandalous. Showing ankle, marry her immediately. There were rules for how long to look, how deep to bow, and which fan signal meant I adore you versus I think you smell like boiled cabbage. Love was a language. Unfortunately, it was Morse code, in Latin, through fog. Would you survive dating in Victorian London? No DMs. No dating apps, just vibes. And maybe a formal letter delivered by footman. Comment if you'd be a hopeless romantic, or if you'd just give up and marry your cat. Let's say you're brave. You write a love letter. It's poetic, dramatic, possibly smells like coal smoke and desperation. You seal it with wax and send it via courier, or, if you read truly fancy, a boy with a hat and a death wish. If the recipient likes it, they might write back. If they really like it, they might give you a lock of their hair. Sweet, yes. Creepy, also yes. Quick note, people literally wore these hair gifts in brooch, rings, even little lockets. Victorian love was one heartbreak away from becoming a shrine. But here's the catch. Once things heat up, and by heat up, we mean a gloved touch followed by intense prayer, there's no turning back. Victorian society didn't do casual. If you compromised someone's virtue, even emotionally, you were expected to marry or duel. And for women, falling in love without marriage could ruin your entire social existence. One bad rumor and you're not fun and flirty, you're fallen and unemployable. And then, back to the workhouse. Love, high risk, no reward, still better than dying alone. Did you know some people had to get a license to marry quickly? It was called a special license, mostly used by rich people who were in a hurry to tie the knot before gossip tied their reputations to the gallows. But if you were poor, you had to announce your wedding for 3 Sundays at church, called reading the banns. So imagine this. You're in love, but first, everyone in your entire neighborhood hears about it. 3 times, publicly, with judgmental coughing from pew 2. So, you've made it through the soot, the sewage, the child labor, and the leeches. But now it's night, and the city above is only half the story. Because beneath the cobbled streets of Victorian London is a whole other world. And it's way weirder than you think. No, not vampires. Okay, maybe one. I'm talking about crypts, tunnels, secret societies, and places where gaslight was both a literal light source and an emotional weapon. Dim the lights. Grab your lantern. Try not to breathe too loud. We're going underground. You're walking along Fleet Street at midnight when you feel a draft. From beneath a manhole. What's down there? Miles of abandoned tunnels, old post office tubes, sewer routes, plague burial chambers, and half-forgotten vaults beneath long-demolished churches. These weren't just built for the vibes, Some carried mail, some carried corpses. Some just existed, for reasons no one remembered. Which is always a good sign. If you listen carefully, you might hear water dripping. Or rats arguing in Cockney accents. And if your candle goes out, good luck. The darkness down there isn't just dark, it's thick. It presses. Now you're in a dimly lit room behind a butcher shop. There's no sign. Only a knock, shave and a haircut. 2 bits. A hatch opens. You're let in. Welcome to a gentleman's club. But not the boring kind with cigars and political gossip. No, this one's a cover for a secret society. Maybe it's the Order of the Golden Dawn, magicians, mystics, and possible time travelers. The Hellfire Club, infamous for their drunken orgies, fake satanic rituals, and questionable taste in robes, or even a resurrectionist syndicate. Dealing in fresh corpses and anatomical black markets. They drink absinthe, speak Latin, and occasionally duel with parasols at dawn. You're underdressed. Next stop, Limehouse. You duck into a smoke-filled parlor. Red curtains, low stools, sweet, heavy air. A place where reality melts. You're in an opium den. These weren't just drug havens, they were escapes from a life of factory bells, child deaths, and foggy mornings. Working men, riders, and the occasional nobleman lay sprawled on cushions, chasing dreams in drifting clouds of pipe smoke. Even Charles Dickens wandered into these places. Not for research, allegedly. It smells like burnt sugar and something far more metallic. Someone in the corners quoting Shakespeare. Or hallucinating rats with monocles. Hard to tell. Quick poll. If you had to visit one, would you choose the secret tunnel beneath a plague hospital, a gentleman's club run by possibly cursed aristocrats, or an opium den filled with Victorian poets and regrets? Yes, you read that right. The London Necropolis Railway. A literal train line for the dead. Because there were so many bodies, and not enough space in the city, they built a train service just for funerals. It left from Waterloo and took corpses and their grieving loved ones out to Brookwood Cemetery. Tickets were sold by class. First class, nice coffin, chapel service, maybe a sandwich. Third class, pine box, no frills. Try not to jostle grandma too much even in death. Class mattered. Ever wonder why gaslighting is a thing? Well, in Victorian London, most homes were literally gaslit, with open flames hissing from wall lamps. Romantic? Sure, but also wildly dangerous. Gas leaks caused hallucinations, paranoia, mood swings, not to mention fires and the occasional explosion that sent Aunt Mabel through the ceiling. So yes, if you told someone in 1854 that they were imagining things, there was a non-zero chance you were correct because the gas was messing with their brain. Welcome to the origin of psychological warfare and why your living room smells like sulfur. Here's the thing about the underground. It wasn't just tunnels and crypts. It was a symbol. It represented everything hidden in Victorian society. The poor shoved out of sight, the dead stored neatly beneath the vices covered by lace curtains, the secrets no one admitted to. Unless they had a key and a lantern, the real London wasn't above ground, it was below. And it's still there, just waiting. Next time, we're raiding the Victorian kitchen. What did they eat? What did they survive eating? And what foods will haunt your nightmares forever? Hint, if it jiggles and smells like fish, run. You glutton for punishment. Now it's time for ... Part 11, Dr. Death will see you now surviving Victorian medicine. So you've got a headache, or maybe your leg hurts, or your child's coughing up blood. No worries. It's 1850, what could go wrong? Short answer, everything. Before we dive in, hit like if you've ever felt sick and thanked modern medicine, and comment below. Which Victorian treatment do you think would kill you first? Now grab a leech, lie back, and don't worry, this won't hurt a bit. That's a lie. It's going to hurt a lot. You walk into a Victorian surgery. There's blood on the floor, rust on the instruments, and the doctor is wearing the same coat he's worn all week, covered in souvenirs from past patients. Antiseptic, never heard of her. Anesthesia. If you're lucky, maybe some chloroform, if it doesn't kill you first. And yes, that's a saw. And yes, it's for your leg. Fun fact, amputations were a popular medical solution. Got a splinter, off with the arm. Stubbed your toe, say goodbye to that whole foot. Let's run through your top Victorian remedies. Bloodletting, feeling faint, Let's drain you like a soup can. Mercury for syphilis, also for destroying your kidneys. Heroin for kids, yes, actual heroin, for teething. What could go wrong? Lard poultices for chest infections. Now you're dying, but buttery. Electric belts for hysteria, impotence, and nervous conditions. Side effects included confusion, burns, and general horror. Did it work? Unclear. But it looked very dramatic. You stagger into a chemist. It smells like mold, oil of wintergreen, and danger. Shelves are lined with laudanum opium in a bottle for coughs, sleeplessness, and grieving widows. Arsenic great for clearing up skin. Also for poisoning husbands. Cocaine tooth drops, no joke, very popular with parents. Tincture of belladonna, beautiful, deadly, and great for dilating pupils or seeing ghosts. Honestly, it's less of a pharmacy, more of a witch's starter pack. Feeling anxious, depressed, a little off, too bad. You're now officially hysterical, possessed, suffering from melancholia, brain fever, or moral insanity. Treatment options include ice baths, isolation for weeks, trepanation, that's when they drill a hole in your skull to let the madness out, or, best case, being locked in an asylum with 200 strangers and one shared toilet. And women. Almost any emotion was labeled hysteria. Cure. A doctor-administered pelvic massage. I'll let you look that up on your own time. Victorian surgeons were all about speed. Imagine, you're wide awake on a table. No painkillers, just a few men to hold you down and the soothing voice of a doctor saying, "Try not to scream." The fastest amputation on record. 28 seconds, including sawing the bone and stitching. The surgeon got a standing ovation. Also, one of the bystanders died of shock. Healthcare, ladies and gentlemen. Not every doctor had a license. In fact, most didn't. You had snake oil salesmen, traveling tonic merchants, bone setters who fixed breaks by praying and pushing things until you blacked out, and of course, quack dentists who pulled teeth with pliers, then offered you a shot of gin and a new wooden tooth carved on the spot. Spoiler, it did not fit, because in Victorian London, mealtime wasn't just a question of what's for dinner. It was, will this kill me? Spoiler, sometimes, yes. So before we tuck in, hit that like button if you were brave enough to bite into 1800s cuisine, and tell me in the comments, what is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Now pull up a rickety wooden chair, light a single candle, and please don't ask what's in the pie. You wake up in your damp little London flat. It's 6 a.m. The fog is already chewing on your window. Time for breakfast, but don't expect avocado toast or a triple espresso. You're getting porridge, watery, gray, suspiciously chewy, dripping on bread, literal animal fat, and if you're lucky, a boiled egg, with the shell possibly still on. Oh, and tea, strong, black, with enough tannins to tan your insides. Sugar, only if you're posh. Milk, haha. No, still hungry. Just chew on some boiled turnip and reflect on your poor life choices. Midday rolls around. You're a chimney sweep or factory girl or mudlark, you need fuel. So what do you pack? Cold meat pie could contain meat. Could contain regret. Bread and treacle, sticky, sweet, and possibly the only good part of your day, eel jelly. Yes, that's gelatin with floating chunks of eel, a flask of weak ale, because water is full of cholera and hope is dead. No, you don't get a nap or a smoothie. You get 10 minutes, a bench made of sorrow, and the sound of a nearby horse relieving itself. Home again. Time for your main meal, and it's a mixed bag. Here's what's on the table. Stew, usually made with questionable cuts, overboiled until indistinguishable from wet cloth tripe, aka cow stomach lining, slippery, gloopy, somehow both rubbery and chewy. Toad in the hole sounds cute, is not. Sausages in Yorkshire pudding batter. Greasy, spiteful, delicious. Boiled cabbage, it smells like someone's dying. Possibly you. And for dessert, spotted dick. No explanation. You're just going to have to live with that name. Also, side note, nothing is refrigerated. Nothing is safe, and if it's green, it might just be mold. If the food didn't start bad, it often got worse. Why? Because Victorian street vendors were the undisputed kings and queens of food fraud. Bread was bulked up with plaster of Paris. Tea leaves were reused, dried on the floor, and sometimes dyed green with copper. Beer was flavored with strychnine for kick and milk, often watered down, and whitened with chalk. Got food poisoning. Too bad, the NHS won't exist for over a century. Of course, if you were upper class, you were feasting like a bourgeois Roman emperor. Your dinners had oysters by the dozen, pigeon pie with decorative feathers still attached, roast swan because chicken is for peasants, and aspic, basically meat jello. Terrifying, elegant, wobbly. Also, everything had lard, gravy, or brandy. Sometimes all three. Your job is to look pretty and eat slowly, not scream when your dessert blinks back at you. What's the most cursed meal you've ever had? Tell me in the comments, and bonus points if it jiggled without permission. Would you try Victorian eel pie, or are you team nope, just bread forever? Let's take a walk through a Victorian market. You'll see vendors yelling things like, hot sheep's trotters, fresh cat's meat for your pets, allegedly peas pudding in a pot 9 days old. Yes, that's real, and the smell? Imagine old fish, coal smoke, horse manure, and boiling onions having a very loud argument. You step around a puddle of questionable origin and buy a penny pie. It's hot. It's flaky. You bite into it and think, this is delicious. And then you wonder, what kind of meat was that, exactly? Nobody answers. You survive the meal. Barely. Your stomach is making Victorian ghost sounds. You lie on your straw mattress and wonder, was that really eel in the pudding? Or was it something worse? And you think, modern food may be overpriced and weirdly named, but at least you know what's in your nuggets. You wake up and head to work. With a bucket. Not for cleaning. Not for water. For dog poop. Yep. Urea Pure Finder, a fancy name for someone who collects canine droppings off the street and sells it to tanneries. Why? Because dog waste helps soften leather. You make just enough to eat. You smell like, well, dog. But hey, it's an honest living. A deeply stinky, soul-questioning living. You want danger and discomfort. Meet the leech collector. Your job? Wade into marshes, let dozens of slimy bloodsuckers latch onto your legs, then carefully peel them off and sell them to doctors. You lose a pint of blood a day, maybe more. You get infections. Fainting is a perk, and for this, you're paid pennies. On the plus side, you are technically in healthcare. Let's take it underground. You're a tosher, sewer scavenger. You wade waist-deep in human waste beneath the streets of London, looking for dropped coins, scrap metal, and the occasional dead rat which might also be valuable. Don't ask. It's dark. It's dangerous. It's surprisingly competitive. Bonus. Sometimes the methane gas ignites. So now you're in a literal fire toilet. Still better than answering emails all day. Now for the truly nightmarish gig. You're a resurrectionist, a body snatcher, a professional grave robber. Medical schools need cadavers, and the law only allows bodies of executed criminals. Solution: you and your buddies dig up freshly buried corpses and sell them for dissection. Creepy? Absolutely. Illegal? Technically yes. Lucrative? Very. And if you're caught, you might be chased, beaten, or worse, buried alive in the next grave over. So? Maybe don't put this one on your resume. Still craving that sweet scent of industrial suffering? Be a mill worker. Long hours, low pay, dangerous machines. You lose a finger, keep working. Or try being a matchstick girl again. Constant exposure to phosphorus, zero ventilation, and glow-in-the-dark jaw rot as a built-in feature. Imagine working in a scented candle factory, but every candle wants you dead. Too small, too old, or too frail for the sewers. Become a crossing sweeper. Your job is to clear horse dung from the path so wealthier folks don't get it on their boots. You sweep, bow, and hope for a coin. It's the gig economy, Victorian edition. And if someone kicks your broom away, too bad. There's another starving kid waiting to take your place. Alright, real talk. Which of these jobs would you actually take if you had to survive? Pure Finder, Leech Collector, Resurrectionist, Crossing Sweeper, Tosher. Drop your brave or terrible choice in the comments and tell us why. Bragging rights and emotional scarring await. Because people were desperate. No social safety net. No unemployment benefits. No worker protection. Just you, a shovel, and the vague hope of not dying this week. The Industrial Revolution brought machines, money, and mass misery. Workers were disposable. Children even more so. You could be replaced before your blood dried, but it didn't stay that way forever. Labor movements rose, unions formed, laws changed. By the late 1800s, rules started creeping in. Limited hours, age restrictions, safety measures. Revolution, yes. But it was slow, painful, and covered in soot. And many of those early reformers, they started in those awful jobs themselves. So the next time you feel stuck in your boring day job, just whisper, "At least I'm not collecting dog poop for a shilling in a top hat." If you learned something new, give this video a like, or even better, share it with someone who needs to stop romanticizing the good old days. Next on our grim little tour, High Society Secrets, what the rich were doing while you starved, or diseases that made Victorian London even grosser and how they tried to cure them. Part 16, High Society Secrets, what the rich were doing while you starved. Hey there, soot-smeared survivors, ready to rage just a little? While the working class was inhaling coal dust and hoping their teeth didn't fall out before age 20, the elite of Victorian London were sipping champagne, giggling behind fans, and scandalizing each other in candlelit parlors. Before we pull back the velvet curtain, hit like if you've ever wanted to throw a croquet mallet at a duke, and comment below. If you were rich in 1870, what absurd luxury would you indulge in? Now powder your wig, dim the gas lights, and prepare for a little rage and a lot of ridiculousness. You arrive at a London townhouse 5 floors tall, chandeliers glowing, butlers gliding through halls like shadows in white gloves. Outside, horse dung, shouting, poverty. Inside, brandy, bock, and someone debating the ethics of fox hunting while wearing an actual fox. Welcome to upper-class London, where appearances are everything, money is inherited not earned, and your biggest challenge is pretending you didn't notice the scandal unfolding across the ballroom. You think your skinny jeans are restrictive. Meet the corset, your ribcage's worst enemy. Rich Victorian women squeezed themselves so tightly they'd faint at dinner, not out of hunger, out of fashion. Men, meanwhile, dressed like they were about to duel at any moment, top hats, tailcoats, monocles. If you looked mildly uncomfortable, congratulations, you were doing it right. Oh, and don't forget your calling cards, basically 1800s business cards, but for showing off how very refined you were. Dinner wasn't food, it was theater, 10 courses. Silverware you need a flowchart to understand. Peacocks with their feathers reattached after roasting. And jelly, so much jelly. If it wobbled, they served it. Conversation topics included art, politics, and who was scandalously not invited. And you sit quietly if you're a woman, or pontificate smugly if you're a man. That's the rule. Also, no elbows on the table, or you're exiled to social Siberia. Here's a fun fact, the rich smelled, not great. Bathing was a sometimes activity, and perfumes covered a multitude of sins. Toilets, a luxury. Many houses still use chamber pots. And deodorant, not invented yet. Your armpits had diplomatic immunity. But they looked clean. And that was enough. Underneath those gowns and waistcoats. Same human grime, just with better marketing. Imagine Instagram drama, but with corsets. Affairs, bankruptcies, secret illegitimate children, all whispered about over tea with just enough plausible deniability to avoid duels. The most elite gossip, who was seen with whom. A man standing too close to a woman could destroy her reputation for life. Unless she was rich enough to just move to Paris. What did rich Victorians do for fun? Collect Egyptian mummies, yes, real ones. No, they didn't ask permission, host seances and tried to talk to ghosts. Keep exotic animals like monkeys or crocodiles in their gardens. Write novels under fake names to avoid looking unladylike. Oh, and competitive tea parties. Because nothing says power like cucumber sandwiches and quiet judgment. Some rich folks did give back, sort of. They sponsored orphanages, opened soup kitchens, and funded hospitals. But often only for PR, or because guilt makes for great dinner conversation. It was less lettuce fix poverty and more lettuce make it slightly prettier, so I don't have to see it on my way to the opera. So, if you were rich in Victorian London, what would your guilty pleasure be? A scandalous novel under a fake name, hosting a ghost-themed dinner party, adopting a pet monkey just to confuse your guests? Drop it in the comments, and let's be honest, we all would have done something dramatic with that level of money and boredom. Victorian London wasn't just one city, it was two, side by side. The rich lived in marble mansions with gas lamps and silk curtains. The poor lived in cellars, soot, and silence. They passed each other in the street, one in polished boots, one barefoot, and never spoke. But under the corsets and coal dust, they were the same species. just born on different sides of the velvet rope. So next time someone says, "I wish I lived in the past, it was so elegant," just hand them a corset, take away their antibiotics, and tell them they now have to flirt using fans and subtle eyebrow movements. If this peek into powdered privilege made you laugh or cry, hit like, share with your favorite snob, and let me know. Next up, should we peek into Victorian medicine? It's horrifying. Or take a tour of the supernatural side, ghosts, seances, and the rise of spiritualism. Comment your choice, and remember, it's all fun and games until someone poisons the sherry. Stay curious, stay skeptical, stay out of corsets. See you in the seance room. Want to keep going with Victorian medicine, spiritualism, or maybe dive into crime and punishment next? Tonight, we descend into the underbelly of Victorian London. Part 18. Crime, punishment, and a pint of terror, surviving London's dark side. Hey, you still got your pockets? Good. Keep one hand on your wallet and the other on that like button, because we're heading where the bobbies don't patrol after dark. And comment below, which would scare you more, running into Jack the Ripper, or a corrupt Victorian judge? Now dim the lights, bolt the door, and grab something sturdy like a chamber pot, because it's about to get criminally fascinating. You step outside, fog curls around your boots. A scream echoes down a narrow street. And that wasn't a cat, probably. Crime in Victorian London wasn't just a possibility, it was a lifestyle. Pickpockets, con artists, burglars, murderers, the streets were crawling with Dickensian ambition and absolutely zero remorse. Everyone was out for something, a loaf of bread, a coin purse, a new identity. Think your phone got swiped on the subway. Try being a gentleman with 12 buttons on your waistcoat and a silver stuff box just begging to be lifted. Children, yes, children, were trained as pickpockets. Fagin wasn't fictional. He was based on real criminal gangs who used street urchins like human octopi. You're walking through Covent Garden and suddenly, lighter, your coin purse, gone, your dignity, also missing, and the kid who took it, already vanished into a crowd, singing. Enter the bobbies, named after Sir Robert Peel. Top hats, blue coats, no weapons, just a whistle, a notebook, and a hope that criminals respected uniforms. Spoiler, they didn't. Early police work was more polite inconvenience than enforcement. And many people hated them. They were seen as government spies, not heroes. Want to report a crime? Good luck. They might just blame you for it. Let's talk about the most famous Victorian boogeyman, Whitechapel. Women turning up dead, brutally, mysteriously. The killer, never caught. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a murderer, he was a media sensation. Newspapers printed every gory detail. The public was obsessed and terrified. People locked their doors. Women walked in pairs. Suspicions flew like pigeons in a bakery. And Jack, he vanished, just like that. Comment if you think you'd survive Whitechapel in 1888. Be honest, so let's say you get caught. Stealing bread, cheating a lord, talking back to a constable. Welcome to prison, where the punishment is less rehabilitation and more soul-crushing silence and possibly scurvy. You're sent to Pentonville. A masterpiece of misery. No talking, no eye contact. Meals of boiled despair. Solitary confinement so intense, inmates forgot how to speak. Prison uniforms even had hoods, so you couldn't recognize other prisoners. It was like living inside a beige hallucination. What's worse than prison? Execution. And yes, they made it a show. Public hangings were Victorian Netflix. People brought snacks. Kids came. Couples made it a date. The atmosphere, festive. The result, horrifying. And get this, you could be hanged for things like stealing a sheep, writing a threatening letter, being generally inconvenient to someone with power. The Victorians didn't love justice, they loved spectacle. Not all punishments were deadly, some were just wildly unnecessary. The pillory, where you stood with your head and hands locked inward while people threw things at you. The stocks, same concept, more sitting. Transportation, aka, you're going to Australia now, forever. Imagine stealing a loaf of bread and waking up 6 months later on a boat full of rats, heading for a continent you didn't know existed. And yes, people were still doing this in the mid-1800s. Here's the kicker. If you were poor, crime was survival. If you were rich, it was a scandal. Quickly forgotten after tea. A baron might duel a man to death and walk away with applause. A chimney sweep might steal a handkerchief and be hanged. Justice was never blind, it just squinted politely and looked the other way. All right, brave souls, time to confess. Would you be the detective, solving crime with a monocle and a grudge? The outlaw, living fast and dodging the bobbies? Or the victim of a system that made no sense? Tell me in the comments, and bonus points if you include your Victorian crime nickname. So next time someone tells you they romanticize the Victorian era, ask them if they've ever tried dodging both Jack the Ripper and tuberculosis, while eating boiled cabbage and praying their wig didn't catch fire from a gas lamp. If you survived this tour through crime and consequence, hit like, share with your favorite armchair detective, and subscribe for more delightful discomfort. Next time, should we peek into Victorian spiritualism, ghosts, mediums, and the rise of the seance scene? Or dive into childhood in the 1800s? Spoiler, not cute. Let me know below, and remember, trust no one, especially if they sell miracle tonic in a top hat. Draw your curtains, the air is still. The candles flicker, something isn't right. You feel a chill crawl up your spine, though the fire's still crackling. It's time we talked about something the Victorians truly loved. Part 19. Ghosts, seances, and the Victorian obsession with the afterlife. Hey, spiritual thrill seekers. If you re here for murder mysteries and moody candlelight, you re in the right haunted parlor. Before we summon any spirits, smash that like button like you're slapping a planchette on a Ouija board, and comment below. Have you ever seen a ghost? Or just a particularly shady Victorian landlord? Alright, get comfy, dim the lights, and keep your back away from the mirror. We're about to talk to the dead, or at least pretend to. Because in Victorian London, everyone was doing it. Victorians were obsessed with death. Not just because people were constantly dying, although, yeah, that helped. It was the how they processed it. Queen Victoria herself wore mourning black for 40 years after Prince Albert died. 40 years. That's not fashion. That's full-blown devotion. And a little creepy, death wasn't hidden. It was photographed, displayed, turned into art. People posed with their dead relatives in family portraits. Dead relatives, smiling. No big deal. Just a little post-mortem memory for the mantle. Now here's where it gets wild. With all this death, war, disease, chimney accidents, etc., people really wanted to believe their loved ones weren't gone forever. Enter spiritualism, a booming trend where mediums claimed they could talk to the dead. For a price, parlors were transformed into dimly lit seance theaters. People gathered in circles, held hands, and waited. Then came the knocks, the floating tables, the moaning voices, the ectoplasm. Don't ask. Even Charles Dickens got in on it. Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes' dad, was all in. Meanwhile, Houdini spent years trying to expose it all as elaborate trickery. So, were they talking to spirits, or just watching a Victorian magic show with better lighting? Comment if you'd sit in on a seance, or if you'd charge people to fake one. Victorians had an entire arsenal of ghost gear. Spirit boards, the original Ouija, spelling out by more candles one letter at a time. Spirit photography, blurry double exposures that conveniently included ghostly faces. Trumpets, no. Really? To amplify ghost voices. Nothing says terrifying like a haunted kazoo. Mediums used trapdoors, wires, ventriloquism, and straight-up lies. But grieving people were desperate, and desperation pays. Haunted houses weren't feared, they were marketed. People went on ghost tour, visited cemeteries for picnics, and wore jewelry made from the hair of their dead relatives. And if you think that's macabre, imagine receiving a mourning brooch made with Aunt Edith's curls as a birthday gift. Sorry she's dead, but hey, now she's a fashion accessory. Victorian mourning had rules, black for a year, no social events, and if you were caught laughing too soon after a funeral, scandal. Here's the twist, as Victorian society got more into science, they also got more into ghosts. Because science was revealing how little anyone actually understood. Electricity, magnetism, X-rays. If invisible forces could power machines and pass through flesh, why not souls? Even scientists attended seances, hoping for proof. And while many were eventually exposed as frauds, some phenomena remained unexplained. Cue ominous violin. The Victorians didn't just believe in ghosts. They made ghost stories an art form, Think Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Ghosts of Past, Present, and Yet to Come, or Wilkie Collins and the Eerie Woman in White. Magazines were full of creepy tales, the Netflix horror drops of their time. Want to scare your neighbor's cravat off? Tell a good haunting over tea. So, would you attend a Victorian seance? Would you pay a shady medium to talk to Cousin Reginald? Or are you the type to yank off the tablecloth mid-levitation and shout, "Fake"? Drop your ghost hunting strategy in the comments. Bonus points if it involves tea and salt circles. So next time someone sighs and says, "I was born in the wrong era," ask them if they'd enjoy dining next to a corpse photo whispering to dead Uncle Henry in the dark wearing jet black morning clothes. In July, if you made it through this spectral chapter, give that like button a haunting caress, share with your favorite goth friend, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Speaking of which, shall we explore Victorian childhood spoiler, mostly cold and disease or Victorian entertainment circuses, freak shows, and death-defying stunts? Comment below, and remember, just because they're dead, doesn't mean they're gone. Childhood? Yep. Today, you're not a dashing aristocrat or a clever pickpocket. You're a Victorian child. Congratulations, you were born into a world of coal dust, bad dentistry, and zero rights. Part 20. So you've been born a Victorian child, what now? Hey folks. If you've ever thought, you kids today have it easy, just wait until you learn what kids back then were doing by age 6. Hint, it involves rats and stairs. Lots of stairs. Smash that like button like you're smashing a chimney brush against soot. And tell me in the comments, would you rather be a street urchin or a workhouse orphan? Now put on your tinest boots, grab your crust of bread, and let's start the worst childhood of your life. You're born. Congratulations, you scream. A midwife slaps your bum, and someone boils water because they always boiled water. If you're lucky, you're middle class, born in a tidy townhouse with slightly less mold. If not, you're born in a one-room flat with 6 siblings and 1 chamber pot. And guess what? Infant mortality is sky high. You have a better chance of surviving dueling a goose than making it past age 5. You're 3. You don't play with iPads, you play with fire pokers. Toys? No. You might get a wooden hoop or a doll made from spare laundry. Want to go outside? Sure. Just dodge the carts, dogs, puddles of something that definitely isn't water, and the occasional open sewer. Oh, and don't talk too much. Victorians believed children should be seen, not heard. Unless you're reciting moral lessons or dying of something tragic. Education, optional. Unless you're rich, your school is a grim charity classroom or someone's damp basement. Lessons include the alphabet only at to G, if the teacher's silver psalm memorization, how to sit still without coughing up soot, and if you misbehave, expect a nice caning. Or worse, being made to wear the dunce cap, which is exactly as humiliating as it sounds. Can't afford even that, off to work you go. You're 6 years old, time to contribute to the empire. Jobs include chimney sweep, you're lowered head first into a soot-choked shaft with a brush and hope. Coal mine worker, you crawl through narrow tunnels dragging carts full of black lung. Factory helper, you fix machines while they're still running. Yes, still running. No gloves, no goggles, no HR department, your lunch. Maybe a turnip, maybe not. If you're an orphan, life gets even worse. You're either in the workhouse, basically a prison with less food, or out on the street. Street jobs? Singing songs for coins, sweeping roads for rich people's approval, pickpocketing for survival. Street urchins were so common they became a whole literary aesthetic. Thanks, Dickens, you made poverty quaint. Okay, let's talk fun. Kids did have games, like hoop rolling, marbles, and kick the bladder. Yes, sometimes, that bladder belonged to a pig. If you were middle class, you might own a toy theater or wind-up automaton. If you were poor, your entertainment was watching other people eat. And if you were rich, your fun was piano lessons and being told you're disappointing. No vaccines, no toothpaste, no antibiotics. Children caught scarlet fever, rickets, cholera, general Victorian malaise medicine. Usually mercury, laudanum, basically opium, or being told to walk it off. Coughing blood was basically a childhood hobby. And dentists, oh, honey, if you think braces are bad, try getting a molar pulled with pliers by a man who also sells wigs. By 12, you're an adult. Sort of. You might be married off. You might be working 14-hour shifts. You might be in jail, all before you hit puberty. Childhood wasn't a protected phase, it was just a brief window where you were expected to survive long enough to become useful. And if you made it past 20, congratulations. Now you get to work until you die. So tell me, what would your job have been as a Victorian kid? Chimney crawler, matchstick girl, bookbinding assistant with dreams of being the next Dickens. Drop your child labor or job title in the comments. Bonus points if it includes coal or tragedy. So next time someone says, kids these days are too soft, gently remind them, at least they're not scrubbing chimneys with their faces. If you survived this grimy, gritty look at Victorian youth, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share it with your favorite exhausted teacher or historically inclined friend. Tonight, we enter the strange, the spectacular, and the slightly sketchy world of Victorian entertainment. Part 21. Bread, circuses, and bearded ladies. Victorian entertainment. Unhinged. Hey friends. If you think entertainment back then was just sitting stiffly at the opera, sipping tepid tea, think again. Victorians were starved for drama, novelty, and a touch of scandal, kind of like us, just with more corsets and fewer TikToks. Before we roll up the velvet curtain, hit that like button like it owes you a guinea, and comment below. What would your Victorian stage name be? Mine, probably the Great Disappointer. You know, for branding. Alright, dim the gas lamps, adjust your monocle, and let's step into the wild, weird, and often deeply unregulated world of 19th century fun. You step off the street and into a cramped, smoky music hall. The air smells of spilled gin, coal dust, and cheap perfume. The crowd is already shouting, and the show hasn't even started. Welcome to the working class rave of the era. Forget quiet concert etiquette. Music halls were rowdy, chaotic, and borderline dangerous. Imagine karaoke night, but everyone's in a waistcoat, and someone might throw a potato. On stage, saucy singers, comic sketches, ventriloquists, and people impersonating animals. Audience participation was mandatory, or at least strongly implied by the threat of being heckled. Got something funny to say? Say it loud. Got tomatoes? Use them. Now, let's dive into the murky moral swamp of freak shows. Victorian crowds flocked to see wonders of the world. The bearded lady, the human skeleton, the two-headed boy, sometimes a hoax, sometimes ... Not entire families who were sold as tribal curiosities, yikes. Some performers embraced the spotlight and got rich, like Joseph Merrick, a.k.a. the Elephant Man, who gained public sympathy and even royal attention. Others were exploited beyond belief. It was equal parts fascination, fear, and flat-out racism, often presented as science, which is ironic, because 99% of it was made up. But hey, nothing says family night like existential horror. Magic wasn't just for seances anymore. Theaters packed in crowds to see tricks that blew minds in a pre-Netflix world. Enter Harry Houdini and his fellow escape artists, mind readers, and levitators. People believed these performers were more than magicians. Some thought they had actual powers. One guy sawed a woman in half. The audience screamed. Then cheered when she popped up whole. Or when her twin popped up whole. Yeah, they had tricks. Everything from floating women to vanishing coins to bullet-catching stunts played with the edge of danger. And Victorian London loved danger. Yes, the circus, but not your sanitized, cotton candy modern version. Victorian circuses were chaotic traveling beasts, quite literally. Giant tents, trained horses, knife throwers, fire eaters, and very, very questionable animal care. Lions, elephants, and bears were paraded through the streets to draw a crowd. And yes, clowns were there. And no, they weren't cute. Imagine a clown, in full makeup, holding a live goose and smoking a pipe, whispering poetry at you in the fog. That's your next nightmare. You're welcome. Entertainment in Victorian London was sharply divided by class. The rich went to the opera and theatre, Shakespeare, Ibsen, or melodramatic plays with lots of fainting. The poor went to pub sing-alongs, boxing matches, and public executions until they got banned in 1868, boo. And then there were the gray areas, penny dreadfuls, cheap horror fiction sold to kids, lectures on phrenology, mesmerism, and other sciences that were ... mostly nonsense. Risk dancing shows that walked the legal line of decency and often fell off it entirely. Victorians wanted fun. But also morality, but also cleavage, it was a delicate balance. So tell me, what's your Victorian idea of a good time? Are you clapping politely at the opera with your tiny glasses? Shouting at a ventriloquist while deep in your third gin? Or are you backstage, nervously oiling the cannon you're about to get fired out of? Drop your entertainment style in the comments. Bonus points if you'd survive an evening at a Victorian freak show without fainting. So the next time you're scrolling Netflix, unsatisfied with your 100 options, just be grateful you're not watching a man juggle flaming sausages in a tent full of raccoons. Victorian entertainment was bold, bizarre, and built on equal parts creativity and exploitation. Fun, absolutely. Ethical, not always. If you enjoyed this trip under the gaslit spotlight, hit that like button, subscribe for more historical chaos, and share this with your most dramatic friend. Hey romantics, heartbreakers, and time-traveling flirts. If you think modern dating is awkward, ghosting, demiz, and the dreaded you up, text, try navigating romance in a world where eye contact was borderline scandalous. Before we swan dive into a world of repressed desire and tragically poetic suitors, hit that like button like it's a calling card from a dashing gentleman. And let me know in the comments, would you survive Victorian courtship? Or just be exiled for improper glove etiquette? Dim the lights, pour yourself a sherry or tea, and prepare to enter the slowest, most passive-aggressive dating scene in history. You're single in Victorian London. You can't swipe right, you can't flirt at a bar. You can't even say hi without an official introduction, a chaperone, and probably a small orchestra playing in the background. First step, the gaze. You see someone at a ball, across the room, under candlelight, probably while someone's fainting in the corner. You exchange approximately 1.5 seconds of eye contact. Boom. That's basically third base. Now you want to court them, but not date. Dating is for Americans and loose mortals. You send a calling card, like a Tinder bio, but on embossed cardstock. The lady may accept your visit, but only under the supervision of her mother, her aunt, or a very suspicious butler. Your conversation must involve the weather, the vicar's sermon's mutual hatred of the French standard physical contact. Only if you're trying to pick up a dropped handkerchief. Even then, tread carefully, Casanova. Victorians were obsessed with secret languages because saying what you meant was far too forward. Want to say I love you, give them red roses. Want to say I am watching you from across the room but can't legally express it? Try yellow acacia. Fans were basically emotional Morse code. Fan in right hand equals yes, fan in left equals no. Drop your fan equals I love you or possibly help. I fainted, it was like texting. If texting was done with your wrists and zero emotional clarity, once you've established mutual interest through glances and lace accessories, it's time. For the letter, Victorian love letters weren't you up. They were my soul trembles with longing at the mere scent of your gloves. Seriously, these things were full-on gothic romance novellas. Some were so dramatic they were later published. Others were so indirect you needed a cryptographer to decode the sentiment. And yes, letters had to be properly folded, sealed with wax, and delivered by someone who wouldn't accidentally read it and blackmail you. Not all love stories ended in lace and lila. If your parents didn't approve, tough. Marrying for love was considered risky, unless your beloved came with land, income, and a pedigree longer than your dining table. But some rebelled. Elopements to Gretna Green, Scotland, because laws were looser were a thing. Affairs, even juicier, just don't get caught, because if you did, it meant ruin, social exile, public shame, and lots of dramatically torn letters. Also, you might get challenged to a duel, which, honestly, pretty cool. If things go well, and by well I mean you've courted each other for 8 months, via supervised conversations and hydrangea exchanges, it's time to propose. But wait, not to her father. You ask for permission. Present your income details, yes, really, and then wait while he decides whether you're worthy of his daughter and her dowry. If approved, you propose. If rejected, you disappear politely into the night, heartbroken but well-mannered. And if she says yes, you may now hold hands. Once. For about 4 seconds, in a well-lit room. Congratulations. The pneumatic coffin and my favorite, a one-way ticket to consumption. But hey, at least it beat walking through ankle-deep sewage. Heading out of town, time to board the steam train, the industrial age equivalent of a rocket launch, but with more top hats and fewer safety regulations. First class, velvet seats, white gloves, and probably a guy named Reginald offering you a brandy. Third class, wooden benches, no roof sometimes, and a strong chance of frostbite. Accidents, frequent. Brakes, optional. And if the boiler exploded mid-trip, well, you'd make the evening papers. Still, it was revolutionary. A journey that once took 3 days now took 5 hours, to nervous breakdowns, and a complimentary cinder to the eye. Yes, pray, and swerve. Oh, and roads, potholes big enough to swallow a corgi. More than one per soul lost a wheel, or their lunch, before getting to Paddington. Could you handle Victorian transport? Are you braving the steam-choke tube like a soot-covered legend? Or do you tap out at open-air third class with no roof? Tell me your commuter name below. Baroness of Delays, Sir Suitface the Eternal Latecomer. Mine's Lord Tardy of Carriage Rattle. So next time your train's 5 minutes late, or the Wi-Fi on the bus cuts out, just remember, at least you're not inhaling coal smoke in a tunnel full of rats. Victorian travel was bold, filthy, and vaguely life-threatening. But hey, it got the job done, sort of.